Hey, welcome, and thank you so very much for joining me on another episode of Talking Cloud. Now, you hear it every time. This is where we talk about cloud, anything cloud, all things cloud. And come on, man, what part of computing doesn't touch clouds some way, somehow today? And it's only going to continue for sure, for sure. Now, I've also always told you, Gilligan here, no professor, but I always have amazingly brilliant guests. And today is going to be a super episode, I know, because I think you guys know I'm not scripted. And I love these kinds of episodes where, I don't even know Paul. I've talked to him for 3 minutes before we hit record. But I did briefly look through his background, almost 2 decades at IBM. Last role, I think, was a global OEM role. We'll hear more about it. Obviously, he learned some stuff. And I don't want to even spend a whole lot of time because I could go through his storied career, but I'm eager to get into what he's doing now because it sounds very interesting when I read about it. It's called Brand Engagement Network, or BEN. It's Paul Chang, founder and CEO. Thanks so much for being here, Paul. I'm really jazzed to hear about this company you've built.
Thanks for having me, Grant. And just one clarification. I am the CEO, but I'm not the founder of the company.
I'm sorry. Okay.
No worries. We have a couple of really very brilliant founders. A person named Michael Lucas and Dr. Hansa Ko. Those are the founders of the company, and they're the ones who brought the technology to fold.
Okay, well, thank you for that correction, CEO. So maybe, I didn't do you justice on your career and what you've done and everything. So, well, you can kind of push it from the dock however you'd like to go, Paul. I'm eager to talk with you. So why don't you introduce yourself, how you think's appropriate?
Sure thing. So, I joined Brand Engagement Network about 2 years ago after a 18-year stint at IBM, as you mentioned. And my role at IBM was to take bleeding edge technology that was coming out of their research group. So let's think about technologies such as, blockchain or IoT or advanced analytics. And of course, it includes, artificial intelligence, because IBM, arguably, maybe a grandfather.
Early AI.
That's right. When we did the Jeopardy, I think this was maybe like
Watson.
12 years ago. Watson and Jeopardy, exactly.
Watson. That was the first entrant into this mysterious thing that really didn't have the shape it has today, right? When you heard about this Watson and you saw the commercials on TV, certainly pioneers in this space.
Exactly. And, I think the key difference between, let's say, Watson and how AI has evolved today is really primarily due to this technology called large language models, which has the ability to understand natural human language, understand the intent, and be able to process large, vast amounts of data very quickly and provide a very appropriate response back to the user. Back in the day, as where I was sitting at IBM, when we were building the Watson for Jeopardy, there was a lot of heavy lifting, right?
Sure.
Because people had to build these language models themselves, and try to train the AI to understand and respond. Now that bulk of the
more
heavy
machine
lifting,
learning kind of oriented, right?
Exactly,
Yeah,
precisely. Yeah.
yeah.
So
I
yeah,
mean,
you're not giving yourself enough credit because you obviously knew the difference between
yeah,
the
yeah. Oh,
generative and the machine learning. Yes, that's
I'll tell
fantastic.
you what. I actually, I'm kind of more of a, you know, regular old guy, but when I'm out talking about AI lately, what I always tell people is, hey man, you now have an assistant that knows everything the internet knows, but's dumb as a rock without the right prompt. And I'll put up an image of Transformer, not the robot that
Right.
turns into my
That's
Camaro,
right.
but the one that shows the layers, right?
Hmm.
Uh, and I'll ask my audience, hey, how many of you are familiar with this? How many know what it is? And I have to tell you, I'm startled by how few even know what it is, let alone that it is the underpinning, the foundation, if you will, arguably the key technology that just changed the whole game
Hmm.
in 2017 when it did all go to language, right? And everybody's effort went into one bucket, and it was a big game changer. And so my big harp when I go out and talk to people about this stuff, because again, I am really a Gilligan. I've just taken the effort to really try to understand it because I think that's the biggest responsibility everyone on the planet has. And I've got a slide that says, 100 million users in 2 months, right? We all know that famously with ChatGPT, 16
Hmm.
years for phones.
Hmm.
But this is where I kind of turn a little bit left because I say, so what's the big deal?
Hmm. Yep. So,
And most people don't know.
right. And I would say, what OpenAI has done with ChatGPT, and to some degree, what DeepSeek has done more recently,
Yep.
it's really made AI into a dinner table conversation,
Household word.
household
Yeah,
word, exactly.
totally.
And
I
prior to
love
that,
Claude myself. Claude
okay.
is my favorite. I
Hmm.
really, that's my preferred assistant. Gemini
Gotcha.
is also not right. That's the thing too. There's so many choices anymore, right?
Exactly, and I think it's great that you're mentioning these large language models because they are a critical component of building an AI system.
Yep.
However, it is still only one component of a broader AI system,
Right.
and so at Ben AI, we've actually created this full stack turnkey AI platform that is able to create the assistance that you mentioned very, very quickly in a much more cost effective, scalable way. But it also gives the businesses complete control over what data set the language model is trained on,
Mm-hmm.
where it gets the responses from, and how it engages the users. All of that is managed and controlled by the businesses because I think that is the big gap that exists today between, let's say, ChatGPT being a more of a consumer-oriented app
Right.
to AI being adopted by large businesses because large businesses cannot afford hallucination, right? Even if
Not at
it's,
all. Not
yeah,
at all.
5% or even 1%, they just cannot afford that.
Now, you are way smarter on this, but it's my understanding that one of the ways to address that disparity in terms of knowledge, for example, is using RAG and technology that essentially directs the query, the prompt to, hey, look here first. I'm the authority. And now you can go hunt for the rest there. Is that right?
Yep, I would say it's partially right in our case, right? So
Okay.
RAG, retrieval augmented generation,
Yep.
I do believe that is another critical component in addition to the large language model that
Yep.
is going to make Gen AI much more useful and practical,
Right.
right? So I would say just the one clarification is, you said that's where it goes first and then it goes elsewhere.
Yeah.
In our system, most of our customers have said that that is the only place where it can go
Okay.
to
So
get the
completely
answer.
private.
Completely private, exactly. And
And
if
that
the
changes
answer,
the results then, right? I mean, obviously, I've got far fewer potential guesses since technically you could argue that's all it is. I mean, a very well
exactly.
informed, very smart one. So you're providing a proprietary data set to answer the queries. So I suspect that now we're narrowing in on the real role and function of the band platform. It's got to be very targeted and specific, right?
Exactly. It's targeted, it's specific, it's tailored,
Right.
right? Because what we provide is we we are essentially focused on industry verticals. So we build our large language model, which, by the way, I mean, sometimes I refer to as a small language model because, our,
Relatively speaking.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
relatively
number of
speaking. So,
parameters is not,
right.
in the gajillions or however many they are. And there's a great, I'll send it to you, Paul. There's a
Hmm.
great web page if you haven't seen it. It's informationisbeautiful.net. And on that site, they have a page that's all about LLMs. You'll love it. I'm
Hmm.
serious, uh, because it has some really nice live diagrams, uh, graphs where the bubbles for each of the LLMs are live. You click and they'll actually either take you to it or give you more detail and information, shows parameter size, who owns it, when it was born. Really interesting information. So anyway, I didn't
Hmm.
mean to go off on that
No,
one, but I
no,
think you'd like that.
yeah, absolutely.
But it shows the scale, and what you're talking about is not any of those. You're talking about a custom one that's built just for me.
Exactly, exactly. It's a custom one, dedicated to, your industry and your, let's say, even use case, right?
Yeah. So let's
Um,
say I'm gonna jump right in and I'm gonna
mhm,
ask. Okay, so I'm Ross Dress for Less stores. Okay.
mhm.
Um, Give me an idea of how I want to. If I subscribe, can you give me an idea of how Ben would play a role in uh, Ross business? Just hypothetically speaking, I don't know him. I just
Okay.
was pulling it out.
Yep.
I'm interested because I mean, then I'll really start to, I think, get it.
Sure. So in an AI platform, a complete, let's say, a turnkey platform, there are three components, right? Or three
Okay.
layers. The first layer is the front end, and that's how the user or the consumer would interact with this,
Yeah, the UI.
AI
Yep.
exactly, the UI.
Yep.
In our case, not only is it voice activated or text driven,
Hmm.
we also have an avatar. An avatar would look, somewhat like a human being,
Yep.
but not exactly like a human being because, studies have shown people could get a little freaked out if they know something that is not human but looks very human. It could be a little freakish, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
so we make it just, somewhere in between, a cartoon versus a real life human.
Yep.
But our avatar also is a true three-dimensional avatar, meaning, when he or she turns her head, I mean, you can see the whole profile.
Yep.
We actually have gestures introduced as part of speaking because I like to talk with my hands, and so
Sure.
does our avatar,
Well, I
right?
could tell you're Italian, so that makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. So so we have a very robust front end with an avatar that meets the consumers where they are. Meaning, we have mobile. We can do a mobile app, mobile
Yep.
browser, desktop app, desktop browser. We even have a life-size kiosk.
Hmm.
So let's say in Ross, um, who knows? Maybe when you first enter, it would be nice to have a life-size screen it's just think of a, let's say, 80-inch TV screen
Sure.
turned vertically, and
Sure.
here's a life-size avatar. And, he or she can, when you enter, ask a question. Welcome to Ross. Can I help you find something? Or are you
Right.
looking for sale? And be able to engage in a dialogue. And the person could say, yeah, I'm looking for a winter quote.
Yeah.
Especially if it's on sale, that'd be great. Can you point me to the right direction? And then, we could even actually present the direction or map or
Yep.
store planogram to, get the person there. So that's the front end. We also have a very robust middleware layer where we do a lot of the filtering, safety checks of the prompts, as well as integration with backend systems, right? Because ultimately, in order for these AI agents to be helpful, it cannot be on an island of itself. It needs to be integrated with business processes, as well as backend systems, legacy
Yeah,
systems.
I mean, I immediately think my knowledge base, right? I mean, I it's if it's proprietary, if it's closed, that obviously is also a key place for rich information to help it know what to answer, how to answer, what to say, depending on if I'm understanding it right. And I
Exactly.
suspect I could have uh, uh, I could have 12 displays of monitors that if I had multiple people coming into my store simultaneously, they could go over to each individual one and have that same engagement, right?
Yeah, or you could have, a couple monitors and you could have a QR code. So then people, don't want to wait in line for the monitors. They
Yeah,
can just scan a QR code and launch their own session on their
yeah,
mobile device. So
got it.
so because the AI agent is going to be infused with the data from Ross, right? So all the,
Right.
let's say, product information it carries, it could
Just got
have,
some
let's say,
new jeans in that are super cool and half price
exactly.
or
That's
whatever,
right.
right?
Pricing information,
Yeah.
planogram information. I mean, it
Hmm.
could be fully loaded
Hmm.
as if it's a Ross employee who's been working there for 40 years and
Yep.
they live and breathe that retailer and would have all the benefits of, their learning
Yep.
in a system that is, essentially infinitely scalable, right? So that's
And
kind
never,
of the,
yeah, and never has difficulty getting to work.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
all
Yep.
the other things that we know, right?
That's right. So that's the middleware layer. And then we have the what we call the backend. So the backend has the large language model. And in our case, for most of the customers that we're dealing with, 7 billion parameter seems to be sufficient. Um,
Interesting. Yeah, because I
so
know the data on the other ones, they're in the like,
hundreds of billion, right? So hundreds of billion or trillion, right?
yeah, yeah.
However, that language model is supposed to answer
Every
every
question I
question
have.
for
Yeah,
everyone.
yeah. And
Here,
you're just
I
telling me the inventory and the cool
the
things on
Ross,
sale at
yeah,
Ross. Yeah,
exactly,
yeah, yeah,
exactly, and
yeah.
I do it in conjunction with the RAG. So with my small language model
Yeah.
and the RAG, now I have the complete Ross system
And
covered.
it's a proprietary SLL
Yep,
or SLM, although it is still large. It's all
yep,
relative, right?
that's right.
But
And
that's a big key. Uh,
so
so I'm just
let,
thinking through. Go ahead. I don't want
Oh no,
to.
I just want to kind of finish the thoughts on
Yeah,
my
yeah, yeah,
back
yeah.
end, right? So the reason that we do this is one, while we largely still depend on, let's say, GPUs to train our language model. Once it's been trained, we can run our system on CPUs.
Oh wow.
Now that's a game changer, right? Because we are no longer dependent on
Hmm.
the availability of GPUs. Now, mind you, GPUs are more powerful. They process things, simultaneously in parallel. So, it is a better or more higher performant chip.
Sure.
However, not everything requires that type of processing power,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
if the data set that you're going to
Yeah.
is
Exactly.
relatively small.
And I would suggest you also have to factor in 5 years from now,
No, yeah,
right? I
exactly.
mean, the
How
bandwidth
much
five,
more? Yeah.
because despite it may not be, in fact, the same metrics that Moore's law measured to reach this doubling every 2 years,
Hmm.
then 18 months, or now almost a year. It's still erasing at that rate due to other advancements in technologies, right? So
Hmm.
the point being, um, and I've had this conversation before, and this sounds similar to what I've talked about, in that because there's really key factors that are game changers that enable things to really change radically: bandwidth, connectivity, compute, and storage. You know, and those are the things that are just going off the hook. But we're both old enough to remember applications that were developed with high degree of sensitivity on payload, and how, the connection type, and how much you're sending down and sending up, and when you're doing it, and whether you're batching or not, and all of these arguably limitations or issues, concerns, they're all kind of gone out the door,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Because now I'm full mesh, high band, persistent 24/7 with a supercomputer.
Exactly.
So immediately when you say CPU, my question first is, does that mean I could expect to see, I mean, pick anything, right?
Yep.
A little Ben device,
Yep.
right? That I mean, that's very interesting on
It's all.
how you could combine that isolated, contained power in a different footprint for a different application to enable that engagement. What if, I'm just thinking goofy off the hook, but when I go into Panera, they hand me this little thing that buzzes when my food's ready. Well, what happens if there's an engagement pod that you get
Hmm.
handed that's your pod?
Hmm. Exactly.
That's a
Exactly.
game. Now, you could say it runs on my phone, but if I can put that power into something that you can't get out the door, it'll beep and do all that other stuff. You know what I mean? You get it at
Hmm.
checkout, you have your pod, maybe that collected things. Oh, because you did this, you've awarded this or whatever. I mean, I could really see an incorporation of the blending of these technologies. I didn't mean to get off on a
No,
tangent, but
no, absolutely. And I think I mean you're kind of leading the conversation down to where I wanted to kind of highlight
oh,
some of
good. You
our
got me worried. I
differentiation
was thinking I
anyway.
was really
No, 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 no.
screwing up. It's
It's
like,
great.
shut the fuck up, would you, buddy?
So no, I know this is this podcast is talking cloud. So
Yeah,
obviously we can deploy our solution in let's say public cloud. We also do private cloud,
yeah.
but we can actually deploy on-prem. And
Hmm.
the on-prem server doesn't even have to be connected to the internet for it to
Wow.
work.
So it's all contained.
It's all self-contained, right?
See,
So
that's almost like a throwback to the old
it
days.
is throwback to the old days, but we
You're
are
not air
the
gap,
happy.
but you're not all plugged into everything.
We can be, but we don't have to be, right?
Yeah,
And I think that's the advantage. Now the
sure. Choice,
businesses have a
choice.
choice, right?
Yeah,
And they have the ability to, let's say, if they want to manage the scale or the performance themselves, they could just deploy it in their own, server
sure,
farm, and
sure.
then either add servers or reduce servers depending
Right,
on the performance you're looking for. And
right.
so the idea is, okay, when you're having a conversation,
Hmm.
what is an acceptable, let's say, time in between the conversation, right?
Yeah,
And based on that, and what's the knowledge base that you want this AI agent to have?
Yep.
And the more limited it is, then you need less power, right? So
It's either
it's very
tennis or badminton,
yeah yeah
right?
exactly
I mean,
exactly
tennis, it's
yeah you're
now.
hitting yep,
Badminton, you hit that shuttlecock
and then it takes a little while to come down.
and then it flutters
Exactly.
back, right?
Yeah. And in
Both
fact,
fulfill, right?
yep,
Both
that's right.
fulfill, and it's all coming down to really dinero, man. Because
hmm
when you're talking about speed in the AI world, that
hmm
translates to compute.
Exactly. And you reduce the compute, you reduce the cost, but you also increase the scalability because
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
X amount of dollars pays for, instead of, let's say, 10 concurrent sessions,
Yep.
X dollars could pay for 1,000 concurrent
Yeah.
sessions.
It's
Now,
fascinating. It's exactly what we were just talking about in a way, in terms of how the game's changed on where things reside, how they're contained, the speed at which they respond. I mean, we kind of go through iterations, right, in this industry, right? You could argue mainframes, right, or were a
mhm,
cloud. They were just a private cloud,
exactly.
you know?
Exactly. Well, I'm glad you actually appreciate that because most people think mainframe, oh, this like old, stodgy system that didn't work very well. Mainframes were really good at, few things, right? They were really good at um, calculations and processing in a linear fashion,
Yeah.
right? If that's what you wanted, like these transactional systems,
Oh,
nothing beats mainframe for that stuff, right?
OLTP is still done by mainframes.
Exactly.
It's because there's nothing better.
That's right.
Yeah, there's no
Yeah.
doubt.
And that's why
And
the banking
people
systems rely on them still, right?
completely,
Yeah.
completely. And I think it's interesting how, I was talking with someone just earlier today, Paul, you'll appreciate it and maybe laugh at this, but it was a reseller, right? And I helped open up an Apple dealership in 1983, 6 months before Apple introduced the Mac. And
Mhm.
and and what I was asserting was it's really the same. The role and the job for a VAR today was no different than a computer store in 1983 in terms of the job. If you really wanted to do the job, I'm not talking about comparing it to a CompUSA or Computer City, but I'm talking about like a dealership. It's the same. The only thing that's different now is the numbers. They're
Mhm.
K instead of gigabytes.
Right.
But just about all the other stuff really is very, very similar in terms of finding out and uncovering what's giving you pain and solving that pain and understanding and building for growth and all the other things you're supposed to do, right?
Mhm.
And I just find it interesting how there are many cycles and many things that really are not that different. They're just some new enabling technologies that really are game changing, but at an oversimplified manner, they're the same again. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. And I think as much excitement as, Gen AI has, brought to everyone's, daily lives,
Yeah.
the adoption has been somewhat tempered by the cost and
Yes.
businesses' ability to scale, right? So if
Right.
something works great, but it could only handle 10 customers at a time, but it just might not be
That
practical enough for them, right? But
totally.
if it can handle 1,000 or 10,000
Yeah.
sessions at the same time with the same cost, now it makes sense for businesses to look at, okay, do I want to adopt AI? And can this help reduce the shortage of labor, especially like in healthcare, right? I mean, we all know there's shortage of labor, and then can this tool
Hmm.
augment my staffing in order
Right.
to provide better customer service? At the end of the day, I think it comes down to customer service,
Got to
right?
have a better experience.
You never want to call any business and get a busy signal.
Amen.
or
Yep.
in that, what the phone tree where, you have to, dial 7 for this, and then you go back, and,
Yeah.
you're
That's
you're
so
on hold for
annoying
like
for me.
30 minutes, right? This
I
is 2025. We should not be getting
Please listen
into
to the
decision tree.
complete menu, for
Yeah,
some of the options have changed. And
exactly.
and you're kidding me, right? I
Right.
mean, I
And,
agree with you, and we are at a point where there's voice activated technology where you can cut through that stuff real easily. Although I'm still, call me old school, but I like to have a voice that I can talk to and ask. And now, if I have an AI voice that's as good as a human, then I'm okay with it. But that's where I get a little frustrated when I didn't get that.
mhm.
And you
Yeah,
say,
yeah, exactly.
I
And
didn't get that.
they're either a keyword base, or they have a very limited, functionality through
Yeah,
scripting.
yeah,
And that's not, you know, we know that doesn't work, and,
yeah,
people don't like to engage. And that's why people don't use the chatbots that are on websites, right?
yeah, yeah.
Click here to ask questions. Well, you ask a question, it never knows the answer.
Yeah,
It
you're talking,
just,
and you're talking to a bot. You're not
yeah,
really talking with someone.
that's
The
right.
airlines try to suck you into it all the time too. And
Yeah.
it's like, if I knew I was going to be talking with someone, but it always has a layer I have to go through. Let me get you an agent. Well, that was
Hmm.
what I wanted in the first place.
That's right. But they make
So
it painful for you to
yeah,
get to the agent,
it
right?
totally. So let's talk about Ben and some. Um, Give me some maybe applications if you can, without sharing names or whatever, but
Yep.
maybe you can tell me about well, I'm curious to know how long they've been around. I notice you guys are public,
Hmm.
so you're on the NASDAQ. It looks like you've had a little bit of a bumpy road there, which, hey, I get it. Maybe you can talk a little bit. I was wondering, is that why they brought you in, maybe to help stabilize some of that? Um, but maybe you could talk a little bit about uh, where you guys are in the market, where you're finding some traction, how the product's getting used, that kind of stuff.
Yep. Yep. No, fantastic. Yeah. So sort of the current version of Ben. So Ben's been around for about 6 years,
Okay.
and we were initially commercializing some technology around anonymous user identification using sensors, especially sensors on your phone. We were all about consumer privacy, consumer data protection. So that was the sort of the initial founding of the company
Yep.
then. 2 years ago, we acquired a business or assets of a company out of Seoul, Korea, which had all of these really, really advanced AI technologies. They just didn't know how to, harden those assets into a product and
Yep.
be able to go after a market as large as the U.S. So the marriage really worked out. And once we decided to do that, we had an opportunity to be listed on NASDAQ. So, as a startup company, who wouldn't want that opportunity?
Yeah.
We took the opportunity. Yes, it's been a bumpy first year, but I think most companies they understand that when you merge with a SPAC and you go on Nasdaq, you go from a small private company to a small public company, but the burdens are far greater, right? So I think that's
Totally.
some of the challenges we've been going through. However, there is clear light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm going to describe a couple of these scenarios. So one use case that I think you and I and all of us can really grasp and understand is, we are in a sort of a information age where information may be hard to get. And the specific example might be, let's say, shingles vaccine. I'm not sure if you've gotten it, but I had shingles six
Mm,
months ago.
mm.
And it was around my eye, so it was a little touch and go because shingles can spread quickly. You could lose your eyesight. So it was a
Mm.
very big scare for me. However, if I wanted to, let's say, get the shingles vaccine because I should still get it, my question is, well, when is it safe for me to get the vaccine? Who has this information? Or who has the answer to this, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not readily available to me. However, the shingles manufacturer, through their clinical trial information, through their FDA approved marketing information, maybe CDC guidelines, it has the answer. So if there was an AI agent that these pharmacy chains deployed, where I can ask that question just the way I did in natural language,
Right.
hey, I had shingles 6 months ago. I know I should still get the vaccine. When is it safe for me to go get the vaccine? If I can ask that question and get a scientifically backed answer from a known source, from a trusted website, and an agent from that website, then I'll believe it, and then I'll go follow the directions, right? So that is
Mm.
actually one of the key use cases that the market has told us that they're
Yeah.
interested. So it's
Yeah.
not so much on the sort of the inbound, let's say, call center type of a role. It's actually outbound campaign,
Hmm.
which means, hey, we know you turned 50 or you're about to turn 50. Records show you haven't gotten the shingles vaccine. We recommend anyone turning 50 to get the shingles vaccine, which is a two-shot regimen. So provide all the information, potential side effects, and even perhaps help you schedule the vaccine shots, right?
And would this be a system that's just dialing for dollars? I mean, literally just auto dialing, answer, talks to me like a human, says, "Hey, I saw you had a birthday and happy birthday." If have you had your shingles? No. I mean, is that what you're talking about?
I mean, it could be that, but I would say most pharmacy chains that we've been engaged with are looking at essentially text-based alerts. And it's like a notification you would get, hey, your prescription has been filled, right?
Yep,
So
just
you've
got one.
opted in, you've
Yep,
opted into that. So as
yep.
part of that, they can also send you helpful notices. And one could be, hey, you're over 50, our records show you haven't gotten shingles. Would you be interested in learning more about shingles vaccine? I mean, it could just start with learning and education.
Right.
And then if the person feels compelled to get it because you don't want the painful, effects when you get the shingles, or any, concerns you might have about vaccination in general, it could get addressed very easily. And
Yeah.
then you can, make an appointment and get the shots. And because it's a two-shot regimen, and if you don't get the second shot, you're not vaccinated. And I
Mm,
don't know if people realize this, right? But,
interesting.
our AI agent can explain, hey, you can't just get one shot and be done. You have to come back and get the second shot. So the
And I
AI
would
agent
think
could
it
also
would,
remind you.
yeah, I was going to say, and I sure would be able to know who has and who hasn't had that second one, then pepper the parties that haven't had the second one, because I imagine there's a fuse, right? You can't go indefinitely
That's right.
and then come back 2 years from now and get the second one, right? There's
Exactly.
a
So
time
the
frame.
goal is to protect the patients, right? If they want to be vaccinated, then you want to make sure they're fully covered
Yeah.
under the
And come
vaccination.
on, let's face it. If I'm a Walgreens, I want you back in my store.
Oh,
Walking to the
no
back of
doubt.
the store to get a
That's
shot, because you got
exactly.
to walk through all the stuff that you just might want
Well, so the
or
beauty
need,
of
or I
yeah, the
mean,
beauty
come
of the
on, that's
campaign, the beauty of the outbound campaign is it does two things for the businesses. One, it actually increases the top line. You're actually going to generate more revenue,
sure you
assuming,
will.
this engagement, has higher conversion, right? And then two, you reduce the cost to run the campaign, right?
Yep,
Because you don't need people in a call center to call and answer questions,
yep,
right? You have AI agents that's essentially, linearly scalable,
yep.
and you scale up to the demand that's out there.
How are you so obviously a text message is different for me than an avatar engagement. how do you see, or are you, um, because it sounds like, how could you really do an avatar engagement in that way?
This is how it works. And I'm going to answer you because
Right. I mean,
when you get a text message,
what I'm
you
trying
get a
to,
link. And
okay,
when you click on the link, it could literally launch an AI avatar
got it,
onto
got
your
it.
phone, and
Yeah,
then now you're having this conversation
got it.
with the avatar.
Hey, what's up? And you could say whatever. And
Sure,
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, that's the beauty of our solution. The intro and the outro,
Right.
you can make it whatever is appropriate for you.
And, I mean, one of the things, such a big issue is links in
Hmm.
text messages, smishing and links in general. How do you, I don't know how you overcome that
Well,
concern.
there is another way to do it. So if you get a text message from, let's say your favorite pharmacy chain, let's say it's Walgreens, you could actually launch into a Walgreens website, mobile website, and out of the corner will be a picture of our avatar. And then it'll say, hey, if you want to learn more about shingles vaccine, click on the avatar. And
Yeah.
then you click, and
Yeah.
then it launches. So that's, it's a little bit
Yeah.
additional protection. Obviously,
No,
nothing is
that's,
100%, but
yeah. And are you seeing, I'm curious if there's a significant delta, any delta difference in like the acceptance and interaction engagement, if it's a text message and just kind of textual as opposed to avatar based. Do you see, younger demographic okay with the avatar, or vice versa? I'm curious there.
there's been few studies on AI based
Because one of the things
avatar.
I'll just add,
Hmm.
Paul, because I went to the website and I looked, and you see that um, animation caricature that could look like me. I think, in fact, I have one, an
Hmm.
emoji that my phone made for me, right? Um, but I could see that caricature that is, it's very high res vector graphic image, full
Hmm.
three-dimensional. It reminds me, actually, there was, maybe you'll remember this. There was a program that was like this, uh, it was like, it was a virtual world,
Hmm.
but it was many years ago. It was one of the very first ones. And that avatar looked surprisingly similar to what I remember the avatars would look like when you signed up. But obviously, um, that thing's whole changed. I don't know if you remember that, where you literally it, it was, it's like, I guess, meta. I don't know. There must be some places that are like that. I haven't kept
Hmm.
on it, but
Well, so our avatar is actually completely customizable, right? And if
I
business
can make it
came to
look like
us and
whatever
said,
I want it to look like.
exactly, make it look like our pharmacist and make it look realistic, well, we can do that, right?
Really?
Oh
Re-
yeah, okay, totally. So
so
we
not
actually,
so cartoonish, but more
no,
like,
it's just that is what that's kind of like the baseline we're starting with, because
got it.
studies have shown it can't look too human and
Yeah.
it can't look too cartoonish. You
Yeah.
got to be somewhere in between. So that's
I
what we
thought,
have.
have you seen the website Hey Jen?
No, I have not.
Okay, you got to check it out. You
Okay.
got, because of your business, you got to
Hmm.
check it out. HAYGEN.ai.
Okay.
For free, it's 30 seconds. For 25 bucks a month, it's 5 minutes. For 70 bucks a month, you can create a full-on fake avatar of yourself by
Hmm.
uploading videos and
Sure.
pictures of
Hmm.
yourself speaking, right?
Right.
Um, and so I did some messing around, and I recorded like 20, 15 different languages, all from
Hmm.
a single short video.
Hmm.
And it's amazing because it's not perfect,
Hmm.
but my lips move and my eye, and it's it's not perfect, but man, is it a lot harder to discern than,
Hmm.
you know, the old, uh, you know, the old Godzilla movies where hurry up and
Yeah,
run.
yeah, that's right.
I mean, it's
It's like
not
the
that at all.
dubbing, right?
Yeah,
It's yeah,
exactly.
dubbing in the movies.
But I was amazed on how good it is,
Hmm.
and it's only going to get better.
It's only going to get better. That's right.
But
And
you should check it out,
yeah, we'll
just
do.
because of your biz. You
Yeah,
should
yeah,
check
no,
it out.
no, appreciate it. So, I mean,
Yeah,
if you looked at our avatar, the attention to detail. So we have, I think we have like four standard male avatars of different ethnic background, for female. So, in the female's case, when the woman is like, swaying her head, her hair will actually move like a real person's hair, right?
unbelievable, man.
And all of that, we're actually using a video game engine in
Really,
order to develop it. So when you play these first person video games and you see the other characters, I mean they kind of look somewhat realistic, right?
sure.
And so we use the same technology
Wow.
to incorporate it in. So for us, we are one stop shop. So you come to us and you say, look, I want an avatar that looks like this. I want her to have this type of a voice, like a very excitable, voice with, let's say big variance in tones or intonation.
Right.
You can actually customize all of that. And
Wow.
because we have a platform where we can bring these components together, like building blocks, we can do it in a matter of days and weeks instead of months. That
Wow.
is the fundamental difference. We have all of the components already built out. You tell us what you want, right? How you want this AI avatar to represent your brand,
Right.
and we can put that together in days and weeks. And it would have the exact expertise that you want it to have. And if the answer doesn't exist in the RAG, our AI agent will say, I don't have the answer to that because my expertise lies in these three things. And because at the end of the day, you cannot have AI agents taking a wild guess
No
and
way.
giving you the wrong answer.
I would. I would. I've always said the best. The best mode is, hey, I think I know the answer, but I'm not sure. Tell you what, let me get back to you tomorrow. And I always see it as an opportunity to talk again, to meet
Sure,
again, right? So,
sure.
but I think that that's good. So give me, um, based on your experience, what are the hot use cases that are really seeming? Because I could certainly, the pharmacy
Mhm.
slash CVS, Walgreens kind of thing. That one certainly percolates up. But are there
Yep.
some others?
Yeah, others are essentially, let's say, you're in the market to buy a new car and maybe you're trying to get something, let's say, before the tariffs. You go to, I think it's like 78% of those car shoppers start online, right? They
Yeah,
go to some website and they say,
yeah.
hey, I'm interested in
Houses
this car.
too, man.
Yep, yeah, exactly. That's right. So, so we could have a little AI agent on the corner of the website. You click on it, and you can say, "Hey, I'm interested in buy a Ford F-150 pickup truck. I like to have four-wheel drive, extra towing capacity, must have leather seats, and I want it in red. Do
Right.
you have anything?" Well, the avatar should be able to go through the inventory that it has of that particular dealer and be able to provide an answer for you, within a matter of a couple of seconds,
Hmm.
right? And perhaps even show you the real picture of what that
Mm-hmm.
looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be all just voice driven instead of having to go through filtering menus and click things off. You can actually just do it, through a conversation as if you were at the dealer having this conversation with a salesperson and say, hey, I'm looking for, these characteristics and I want it in red. Do you have
Yeah.
any?
Yeah.
And they'll say, well,
Yeah.
let me check my system and give you an answer, right? So here you can have that same experience without having to leave your home. And then at some point, you're going to be like, well, let me come in and test drive. Can I make an appointment? The AI agent should be able to help you make an appointment.
Hmm.
And by the time you go there, the salesperson knows why you're there. I mean,
Yep.
you could be in and out perhaps
Yep.
in 50 minutes instead of having to spend, I don't know, 2, 3 hours buying a new car these
It's
days.
it's one of my I seriously I hate it. I hate buying a car. I mean, I love a new car, but I just dread the experience because it's always the same thing. Even on the, no haggle pricing bullshit, what happens is then they have to send you through the undercoating drilling and
That's
all,
right.
I mean, it's just, it's like, it's, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I love that idea. And I think to the extent that the technology gets better and better, sharper and sharper, so that it's uh, in my dialogue and answers correctly.
Hmm.
you know, I think it's going to be awesome.
And
Uh,
and where it's really going to drive huge benefit for the consumer is when the AI agent has access to your data so that it could personalize the interaction.
so
So
what
as
if
an
let's
yeah,
the healthcare, man.
yeah,
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you
yeah,
because
no, no, no,
you were
no,
just
all
going to
right.
say something, but I'm thinking there's a space where, man, having the access to the right information in the world of healthcare, pretty big deal.
Mhm.
You were going to say something else. I'm sorry, Paul.
No, 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 no. I think it's really, in order for these AI agents to be that much more useful, yes, it's helpful to have, let's say, generic answers and generic responses. But what if the responses could be more tailored,
Right.
right? And it is more meaningful, more impactful for you, then that's when you really, as a consumer, you begin to see the huge value
Yeah.
of having these AI agents that you can interact instead of having to, Google something or having to
Right.
talk to ChatGPT because those will
Right.
always be generic answers, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, this
the what?
you're talking about like knowing I'm a diabetic, knowing I have high blood pressure,
Absolutely.
knowing uh, I had cancer, or or any of the things. And I'm not saying any of those things about me. I'm really suggesting. Um,
Yeah, I mean, a good example is my shingles, right?
yeah,
If you
yeah,
knew
yeah.
I had shingles 6 months ago, it's not going to push for a shingles vaccine because I think you're supposed to wait 12 months before you get another
Ah,
shot, right?
okay.
So,
There you go.
so these are, I mean,
Yeah,
they seem trivial, but it's very impactful to
yeah,
everyday consumers. And I think that's what business has been waiting for, right? A solution, AI solution that's sophisticated enough to
yeah,
be that useful, that
yeah,
practical, and
yeah,
something they can afford to scale instead
yeah.
of having to worry about where am I getting the next GPU to run this system.
Yeah, it makes me, it honestly reminds me of something Jobs had talked about, where, um, you know, sophistication is harder. Building something that's super easy is much more complex, much more
Exactly.
difficult than building something where it's, very linear and you go down trees, right? I mean, if you think about it from that perspective, um, the more sophisticated something is, the easier and more accessible it is.
Exactly. And
Right.
we're talking about human language, right? So
Yeah.
this is essentially
Yeah.
unstructured, unscripted.
I
You
love it.
have to understand what they're saying, what the intent is, and then you have to give the most appropriate, correct
Yeah.
answer based on that. And that
Yeah.
is not something that you can search the internet to try to get the answer to.
Yeah. No, exactly. So, look, I don't want to take up too much time, but take a minute and tell everyone where they can learn more about you and more about the brand engagement network.
Well, so I think the best place is, as you've done, come to our website, beninc.ai. And
That's
then we
Ben
also,
Inc.
Ben Inc.
BEN
Yep, BENINC.ai.
AI. Okay.
That is our website, and then you'll see some of the avatars there, and you'll see some of our sort of the technological advancements that we have. Obviously, we are a Nasdaq listed public company, so its ticker symbol is BNAI. So we were happy to be able to get the AI into our
Heck yeah.
ticker symbol.
That's awesome.
I have a LinkedIn profile that I publish some useful information. And they can reach out to me through LinkedIn. They can reach out to look at our one of our press releases and reach out to our IR PR firm as well. But yeah, I mean, what we believe we built is a generative AI platform that can easily be deployed, is safe to use, is inexpensive, is scalable, is completely customizable, not just in the look and the feel, but really how the businesses want to interact with their customers. That portion can be customized, right?
Wow.
So, being able to apply, let's say, business rules or logic in addition to sort of the free-flowing, unstructured, natural conversation. Having the ability to do both on a single platform, I mean, I don't know if everyone's appreciating what I'm saying,
Yeah.
but that doesn't exist as far as, I'm aware, right? It's
Yeah.
either free-flowing, large language model, pure generative AI, or it's like only rules-based, only scripted.
Right.
And neither to me are satisfactory. You have to have the ability to be in the middle, but have access to both technology, because large language models are very powerful, but a lot of businesses, sometimes you need rules, right? You just
Yeah.
can't have it say anything and everything.
Yeah.
It needs to know where the guardrails are. And our platform gives the users, give the businesses the ability to set those guardrails.
So what about if I'm a company? I mean, there's no reason I can't think of that this isn't also applicable as an internal platform, as an internal engagement for maybe it's benefits, right? Maybe
Oh, yep,
you know what I mean?
totally.
It's
Yeah,
maybe it's the multiple um, you know providers and networks and deductibles and programs and coverages. I
I
would
mean,
think that maybe that's an area too, right?
that's right. So as a consumer, like, what are the two least desirable phone calls you want to make, right? One is to, like, I would say your cell provider. To me, I never get a
Oh,
good response when I have to call my cell provider or my
cell provider
internet
or
provider.
internet provider,
That's right.
television.
And
Yeah,
then the second, I would say, is your insurance company.
yeah,
Because when you call, you're in that vicious circle and you never seem to get the right person to
yeah,
be able to answer the question, hey, if I go see XYZ doctor, what's
yeah,
my copay?
yeah,
That's all I need to know.
yeah,
And it'll take an hour of your time
yeah,
to get that answer, if that,
yeah.
right? So you're right. So companies can actually deploy to provide some HR functions, right?
Yeah,
Hey,
I could
here's your
see.
insurance program. Here are your list of, you can just say, hey, is Dr. Joe Smith down the road? Is he part of my plan? And if so, what's my copay for visiting him? And
Right.
that should be like answers like this.
Yeah.
And I think, that plus we have some customers who are very interested in an AI that coaches. It's either care managers or it's salespeople. So when
Mm-hmm.
salespeople have to actually describe a, let's say, very advanced new drug that's coming out into the market,
Yeah.
they need to actually,
Tell them
educate the
this.
doctors. Yeah,
Say
they have to
this.
educate the doctors, but then they themselves need training on this
Yeah.
new drug, its efficacy, its side effects, in order for them to do that, right? So now you have an internal expert that you've given it all of the critical data set.
Right.
And now this becomes the trainer
Right.
for your employees who's
Hey,
going to actually
let me
train.
ask my expert. Hang on a second, and
Yeah,
go
exactly.
and literally go to an avatar for the answer.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
You got
fascinating
it.
stuff.
Yep.
This has been awesome, man. Thank you a ton. I mean, we could probably go all afternoon, but then the file would be too big. I
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to do the right quality. It would
Right,
just be
right.
dreadful. But hey, seriously, man, this has been really interesting, a lot of fun. Um, we'll exchange emails, okay?
Hmm.
And I'll send you that link that I mentioned to the large language model. Why don't you send me some information that I can include in the descriptor? We'll probably this will probably get released later in the month. But I'd love to get that back from you, and then I can make sure I include it in the description so people can find you and check out Ben.
Okay. Yeah, we'll do. Yes, Grant, thank you for the opportunity. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was
And I
awesome.
mean, I think you have to give yourself more credit than you do because you know this technology far better than some of the other sort of experts that I've spoken with. So,
Well, I mean, come on, brother. If I set the bar really low, then I make sure I can jump over it with no problem. But I always have an excuse.
yeah,
Hey, I told you.
well, when you
So,
brought up the
but thanks.
transformer, I was thinking, this guy knows more than is leading up to be.
Yeah,
So,
well,
anyway.
I always love that line from Abraham Lincoln is, better to remain silent and thought a fool than to
Mhm.
speak out and remove all doubt.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
anyway,
That's
hey,
a great quote.
just awesome meeting you, Paul. Thanks a ton.
Likewise.
Excellent episode. Ladies and gentlemen, man, this has been awesome. Really cool new technology that's getting out in the market. And, you're going to be probably interacting with brand engagement network in one way, shape, or form here soon. Thanks again, Paul. It was really terrific. Ladies and gentlemen, like, subscribe, share, tell your friends, and we'll look forward to having you back on the next episode of Talking Cloud. Thanks so very much.
Pleasure talking to you, Grant.